Hi, I'm Joe, a Warsaw-based shooting instructor. In today's video, I'm going to discuss the operation and disassembly of the select fire trigger group used in the Czech ZB and Bren family of machine guns. This trigger group was used in the ZB26 and ZB30, designated by the Germans as the MG26T and MG30T respectively, the ZB30j, designated the M37 in Yugoslavia, and the different versions of the Bren. First, I'll explain how the trigger group functions in full and semi-auto modes, and then I'll show you how to take it apart and put it back together again, so stay tuned. The ZB30j and the Bren are select fire machine guns. Their trigger group uses the concept of a trip lever located between the trigger and the sear to provide for full and semi-automatic fire. The safety selector simply allows the trip lever to rise and engage the top edge of the sear in semi-auto, and in an unmodified trigger group, lowers the trip lever to engage the lower edge of the sear in full auto. In semi-auto, the trip lever rises, hooking onto the top edge of the sear, while the top edge of the trip lever is in the path of the bolt carrier. When the bolt carrier comes forward after the trigger is pulled, it pushes the trigger lever down and the sear resets. In full auto mode, the trip lever hooks onto the bottom edge of the sear and pulls it down as long as the trigger is held. But since this trigger group has been converted to semi-auto only, nothing happens. As the safety does not physically block the sear, the weapon can be cocked with the safety on safe. But remember, the dangers of a failure to cock, leading to a negligent discharge, are still present. Therefore, the same handling rules as with any other open bolt machine gun still apply. To disassemble the ZB trigger group, first, push out the safety selector. Next, the sear pin, and remove the sear and the sear spring. And then the trigger axis pin and the trigger and the trip lever. And here we can see the parts of the trigger group: the trigger, the trip lever, the safety lever, the sear spring, the sear pin, the trigger axis pin, and the trigger trip lever pin. In this design, the sear spring is the only part of the trigger mechanism that holds the sear in the upright position and is the only thing preventing the weapon from experiencing a runaway. Collectors may be interested to learn that the trigger group parts in these various models are identical, and in fact, trigger group parts are interchangeable between ZB and Bren models, whereas very few other parts can be interchanged between any of these guns. And here we can see the trigger spring located inside the trip lever. The tail of the trip lever hooks into either the top or bottom edges of the sear. The safety selector pushes down on the trip lever to engage the bottom edge of the sear for full auto, and when it's set to semi-auto, the trip lever comes up and engages the top edge of the sear. In semi-auto, when the trigger is pulled and the bolt carrier is released, it hits the trip, pushing it down and allowing the sear to reset for the next shot. The safety selector in this design only causes the trip lever to move up or down. It does not physically block the movement of the sear, and this is why the weapon can still be cocked while set to safe. To reassemble the trigger group, first start with the sear spring. Next, reassemble the trip lever and the trigger. Make sure that this plunger lines up with the trigger access pin. Now, insert the trigger and the trigger access pin. Get the plunger to line up and now add the sear and the sear pin. Lastly, the safety. And now you know how the trigger group in the ZB and Bren family of machine guns operates and is disassembled. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Check out my machine gun instruction playlist and follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/SurviveWithJoe. Also, please leave your questions in the comments and I'll try to answer them in a future video. Thanks for watching.